Happy New Year's, everyone. Yippee! Or at least, belated Happy New Year's.
Hell no, man. What the fuck?
Look, listen, I know I'm sort of late to making this video, but what matters is that I'm making it. So anyways, 2024. We had a really good year for gaming in 2024, and while I didn't play too many games that exclusively came out in 2024, I still played a butt ton of new games, with some of the ones that I played becoming some of my new all-time favorites, while I also played some games that were, less good, we'll say. So what's going to be the requirements for me to rank a game in today's video? Because while I played an absolutely gross amount of games this year, we're only actually ranking 17 of them. So the thing that these 17 games have in common is that either A, I completed the game, or B, put enough hours into the game to where I feel like I've formed enough of an opinion to talk about it. Also, I have to have played the game for the first time in 2024, because there were some games that I replayed this year, so they won't count. But just to give an example for some games that didn't make it, games like Final Fantasy X and Metaphor, because while I've put a very decent amount of hours into them, I haven't finished them yet, so it feels unfair to rank them when I haven't been able to form enough of an opinion about them. Anyways, enough wasting time and farting around, let's just get straight into the ranking, starting with last place.
Cheers, love! The cavalry's here!
Now, I know I said I was only going to include games that I played for the very first time this year on the list, but technically, Overwatch 2 did come out on Steam this year. And I also put an, disgusting amount of hours into the game. So, yeah, I also just really want to talk about the game's current state, but don't really want to dedicate an entire video to it, because there's like 20 million videos on YouTube already just ragging on the game. But the current state of Overwatch 2 that it's in now is just depressing. It feels like the game has just been on a steady decline throughout the entirety of 2024, and I'll say, if I was judging this game on the state it was in at the start of 2024, it would not have been at the bottom of my list. I'm being 100% genuine here. The start of 2024 was probably the best state Overwatch 2 has ever been in, but talking about the state of the game now, yeah, it's pretty sad. Questionable balancing, new heroes having questionable designs in terms of gameplay, relentless recolors of skins, unfun new game modes / maps, mythic skins that lack actual deep customization, blatant favoritism for certain characters compared to others, removing end of season comp points in favor of drives which introduce intense FOMO and just create an unfun gaming environment, and the biggest critique, lack of any form of innovation across the entirety of the game. It really feels like the game has a severe case of identity crisis. With all the layoffs and whatnot, it feels like the main team working on Overwatch 2 is completely different than the team that was working on it a year or two ago. So the current vision for the game is just not really there. Overwatch 2 right now feels like it's just existing and going through the motions. And by the way I'm talking right now, you probably think I just hate online / live service games. And yes, I mostly do. But a little spoiler, Marvel Rivals is in this ranking, and it's pretty dang high. So yeah, Overwatch 2 is in a pretty rough spot right now, and I just don't see myself ever going back to it unless some major changes are made to help spice up the game and make it feel fresh. And as much as I want to have high hopes for its future, I just don't see it happening, sadly. But I really hope I'm wrong. I really want the best for this game.
Whose baby is it?
So the Telltale Games series are full of some of the best stories and characters we've seen in gaming, while also giving us some of the worst stories and characters we've seen in games. And sadly, Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 2 is pretty miserable. To start with the characters, there is an absolute abundance of them, yet somehow every single one of them are the most useless and insufferable people to ever exist. Despite pretty much all of them being adults, they are somehow stupider and lazier than a literal 11-year-old. You feel nothing when any of these characters die, because every single one of them feel deserved. Clementine can literally give the entire world to someone, and they will still either betray her or just kneel over and die. Then the story. It's just the most nothing burger thing ever. Not a single one of your choices actually matter until the very end of the game, where you can choose between 5 different endings, even though none of these endings actually matter in the grand scheme of things anyway. There are also multiple split decision choices, but they all just have zero impact on not just the overall story and future, but the present events as well. While the overall experience of Season 2 is pretty miserable, it definitely has some things going for it. Firstly, Clementine is just amazing. She's incredibly capable now after the events of Season 1, which she needs to be because she's surrounded by the most useless team of adults ever to exist. But she's also incredibly funny. She's extremely sassy in this game and gets pissy with people really easily. She is an absolute gem and was easily the reason I kept playing. Also, getting to meet a certain returning character as well was definitely a highlight, even if he goes a little bit insane over the course of the season. The theme the game was trying to convey as well was also sorta interesting, being that most of the turmoil in this game is between the people themselves rather than the actual zombie apocalypse. But yeah, just overall an absolute nosedive in quality compared to Season 1, and I only really recommend playing this if you plan to play through the entire series and also really like Clem from Season 1. The Wolf Among Us being this low on my ranking might be the most controversial take in this video, but I don't know what to tell you. I just didn't really like this game. To start with some of the stuff I did like, I really liked doing some of the detective work. In the first or second chapter, you get to investigate a house and a person, and using the evidence you find, you can catch the dude you're interrogating in lies and whatnot, and I really wish there was more of this sort of stuff, especially since Bigby, the person you're playing as, is a detective. Bigby and Snow's dynamic in the first chapter is also really good, which is why the cliffhanger Season 1 ends on was so shocking, which sucks when it literally is just debunked immediately at the start of the next chapter. This game is also quite pretty for how old it is. They did a really good job of adapting fairy tale creatures into a New York setting. That's really where the positive stops, because while the rest of the game isn't inherently bad, there's just not much substance to the rest of it. The game plays it incredibly safe. Most choices, again, this is a pattern in Telltale games, don't actually matter. Some characters go through absolutely brutal character assassination and act completely out of character for seemingly no reason. It feels like things work out for Bigby whether he makes the correct decision or not, where other things feel so out of your control to where it's a miracle whether it works or not. Pretty much every character is absolutely insufferable towards Bigby, which would kinda make sense if you were choosing the in-character dickhead lines, but even if you're nothing but nice to someone, they're still just an absolute bitch to you. I don't know, like, I can see why other people like this game, but maybe I just went into my expectations too high, because I feel like this game just falls short in almost every aspect. Even though sometimes the game does some genuinely good stuff, because when this game works, it really works, and I wish the entire game just worked with me.
It's over 9,000! What, 9,000?
When I was getting together all the games I played this year and giving them their rankings, I did not expect Dragon Ball Sparking Zero to rank this low. But honestly, I just couldn't put it over any of the other games I played. This game is just the encapsulation of underbaked, and it just follows the trend of AAA games coming out and just straight up not being finished. It always just feels like such a slap in the face when you spend this amount of money on a game that, while yes, is definitely fun, is also blatantly not finished. Like, as much faith as I have in the development team to make the game something genuinely amazing in a few months' time to a year, why didn't the game just wait to come out until then? Because the way they've done it, they've made the money that they wanted to make, but it came at the cost of over 90% of the player base not returning. Anyways, I have an entire video dedicated to my review of Sparking Zero, so if you want to learn more or get my detailed opinion about it, go watch that one.
Day is never finished. Master got me working. Someday Master set me free.
Alright, here we go. We're finally up to the games that I don't consider bad. We're in that 7 out of 10 range now, meaning these are games that I genuinely enjoyed my time with and will continue to play more games in their respective series. Spots 13 to 10, I struggled a lot in deciding an order to put them in. So if one game here ranks higher than another one that you don't agree with, it honestly isn't beating it by that much. Anyway, so at 13 here, we've got Warframe. I don't have a super ton to mention about this one, because, yeah, game is very fun, extremely tight gunplay, good visuals, and a decent story. The main thing for me that didn't click was the gameplay loop. Warframe is all about the grind. You are always farming to craft your next weapon or character or whatever, and this hook here is what gathered such a dedicated player base, because spending time crafting a Warframe to use and then equipping it with a build that just destroys the content is the reason people have so many hours in this game. But this just wasn't for me. I find myself without purpose or reason to play the game most of the time, and while I really enjoyed my 30ish hours I spent on the game, I don't really see myself coming back anytime soon. The game is free though, so there's literally no reason to not give it a try.
Let's go! I'm sick of her ass!
So if The Walking Dead Season 2 was an awful set of chapters, and Season 1 was an amazing set, Season 4 is a solid set of chapters. So let's talk about the good, being the large focus put on Clementine again. However, this time, she now sees herself put into the adult role, having to take care of a young child, AJ. It's amazing to see Clementine grown up now, and the way you speak or act around the young AJ actually shapes who he becomes. And while most of who AJ becomes is only relevant when you end the game, there is actually a decision in this game that matters. A decision you make genuinely has impact and is one of the core decisions that shape what ending you get. And that's pretty cool if you ask me. This game is also just gorgeous. While Season 1 was also amazing looking, Season 2 and especially Season 3 look pretty awkward at times, so it's really great that they've really found their step in this one. The supporting cast that surrounds Clementine and AJ this time as well are also significantly less annoying than Season 2. There are a few outliers here that do nothing but just hinder your progress or be annoying, but there are also characters that I genuinely wanted to spend time with, which I can't really say about Season 2. Also, the ending. While, yeah, it's a little bit of a cop-out, it was still incredibly sweet and a nice conclusion to the Walking Dead series. I do have a few problems though, like AJ sometimes being a little too annoying or hindering, the entire season being a little bit short, and little to any influence from the endings from Season 2. But I think I'm fine with that. I'm just glad Season 4 was a satisfying end to the series, and the thing that it almost didn't happen or get cancelled is sort of sad to think about. Also, if you guys are wondering where Season 3 is on the list, I didn't play it. It didn't seem that interesting, but I did watch a playthrough of it at some point, so if you're really curious, Season 3 probably would have ranked either just above Season 2 or maybe even below it. This is another controversial ranking on the list, but in 11th place we have Dark Souls 3. This is one of the games I'm most interested in giving its own video, because I feel like I have a lot to say on it, but pretty much, in short, I think the game is pretty dang good, pretty serviceable experience, but the reason I'm putting it in the 7 out of 10 range is less so anything wrong with the game itself, but more so how I think Elden Ring is better than it in just pretty much each and every aspect. The main thing holding this game back is its age, because I see almost little reason to ever play Dark Souls 3 when I can just play Elden Ring instead, which has better build diversity, world exploration, bosses, graphics. The only things DS3 have going for it is that I think some of the boss designs themselves are pretty damn good, and also the music. Like, some of the bosses themselves look so cool and intimidating or fun to fight, but the music, holy moly. Genuinely, this is one of the best soundtracks I've heard in any game ever. Pretty much every boss has an absolutely amazing OST that are unique to them only, and it's just so incredibly memorable. Elden Ring definitely has some good tracks, don't get me wrong, but a lot of them end up just being serviceable. They fit the boss well and serve their purpose. But DS3 is just on a whole nother level with the music. But yeah, I don't want to talk about it too much here because I sort of want to make an entire video talking about DS3. But just know, the game is very, very good, yes, but it just feels a little bit awkward to play in 2025.
Yo.
Possibly the funniest game we have on the list, Yakuza 0. This is a tough one for me, because this game genuinely has some stuff that makes me want to rank it a 9 out of 10, and then some other stuff that makes me want to give it like a 5 out of 10, hence its position on the list. Let's start with the stuff I like, mainly Kazuma Kiryu. This guy is just an absolute treat of a character. Just everything about him is so good. I mean, look at him, what a little cutie. Also, the story here is just amazing. I love the direction it goes in, with so many genuinely shocking moments, twists and turns, heartfelt moments. You really feel for the characters in Yakuza 0, especially Kiryu. There is also a few characters in the game that are just straight up annoying, but they're pretty far and few between. Also, as I said, this game is just so entertaining. There were so many times where I was just physically laughing out loud during my playthrough, and that doesn't happen often with me, so that's pretty decent praise. So, moving on to some of the things I didn't really like, let's start with Goro Majima. So it's less so that I don't like his character, more so that I don't get what they wanted to do with his character. Our first interaction with him tells us he's a deceptive genius who can put on an act to get whatever he wants. But as the story progresses, neither of these things are really true. He's not really shown to be that smart after his initial introduction at the restaurant, which was incredibly awesome by the way, and he literally never gets what he wants, or not a single thing actually goes his way. And this leads to multiple times in his story sections where he just straight up gives up, and he just sits there and does literally nothing to try and help himself or others, yet things just seem to work out for him. Maybe this identity crisis ties into what his character ends up being at the end of the game, but like, comparing him to Kiryu, it's like night and day. The other thing I wasn't really a fan of though was the combat. Majority of the time, the combat just felt clunky, unresponsive, and just not fun. A lot of combat encounters came down to just throwing a bunch of enemies at you, and depending on how big the arena was would dictate how much fun you could have. The difficulty between Kiryu and Majima was also super lopsided. Because pretty early on, I found that you can just abuse a spinning breakdance move with Majima, and this move pretty much soloed every single encounter without any struggles, where Kiryu didn't have anything like this, and he also just had harder fights in general. Don't get me wrong by the way, I definitely enjoyed this game, quite a lot actually. It's just one of those games where when I go to play the next game in the series, my expectations will definitely be in check. And also, I'll most likely be playing the game on normal or even easy difficulty. Here we go, we're starting to get into the 8 out of 10 games and above, the real good ones, games I give a double thumbs up recommendation to anyone watching. Starting this tier is The Coffin of Andy and Lele. Let's just get gameplay out of the way because it's easily the worst aspect of the game. Now, I say worst, but that's because this is a story game with focus on characters and, well, story, so the gameplay doesn't really extend very far from walking around and interacting with things, but it is serviceable. But the gameplay isn't why you play this game, it's everything else. Let's start with the visuals, because this game, while simple, has an extremely strong sense of style. Character designs are strong, with character portraits being expressive and interesting, along with environment designs that fits the melancholy vibe of the game. The use of mostly dull colours for everything helps give identity and focus to our main characters, Andy and Lele, who have green and pink colours to help give them a unique flair compared to everything else. This brother-sister duo, though, is almost the entire reason you play this game. These two are both so interesting, both individually and together. They both have such different personalities, yet they bounce off of each other so well. Without spoiling too much, what makes these guys so interesting is that, depending on who you are as a person, Andy and Lele are sort of not great people, especially Lele. She is like sort of the devil incarnate, yet they're both still so interesting to watch and play as. I'm always impressed when people are able to make characters that morally aren't good people still really interesting to watch and whatnot. And yeah, I know I said Yakuza 0 is probably the funniest game in this ranking, but this game comes in pretty dang close. It has a lot of sarcasm and so stupid it's funny kind of humor, and it's sort of amazing how funny some of these lines are, seeing as the game has zero voice acting. However, I feel like whenever you mention The Coffin of Andy and Lele, everyone sort of gives you that weird look because it's like, oh no, it's the incest game. But imagine my face when I found that the incest is locked behind a myriad of choices and is only on screen for a few minutes. Like, this game is so much more than that. If you have to take away anything from this section of the video, play this game. Especially since Chapter 3 is coming out soon, and it looks like it's going to be absolutely massive.
And you know what else is massive?
Bugsnax is God's gift to this world, and I would fight in wars or colonize planets to protect Bunga. But with that being said, this game is pretty dang good. It's sorta hard to explain, but Bugsnax is one of the most video gamey games I've ever played. Like, it sorta made me feel like I was a kid again, playing a random game I found at the DVD rental place for my PS2. Does that make sense? Like, everything about Bugsnax is just fun. So much so that I decided to 100% the game, something I never really do in video games. Characters themselves are unique and expressive, the game has an incredibly strong sense of style with amazing and cute visuals. The voice acting for both the snacks and the local residents are amazing. Areas are fun to explore, with some of these areas having Metroidvania-esque locations that can only unlock as you progress the game. The game is also incredibly fun to figure out. It's like one massive puzzle where the more you play, the more tools you obtain to help solve puzzles. The story is also, like, surprisingly mature and even dark at some points, which was definitely surprising to me. My only complaint is that I just wanted more. The game, along with the free DLC, took me roughly 18 hours to do, which is fine by the way. I prefer a tighter experience rather than a 25-hour story that is just filled with fluff. I just mean more in terms of gameplay. There's nothing here that's really innovative or new that can put this game up there with the greats of the greats, but this game is still so incredibly good. If you're looking for something that doesn't take itself too seriously, or you're just a fan of video games in general, you should definitely play Bugsnax. You won't regret it.
Mongrel Intruder.
Coming in as the only DLC on the list, at 7th place we've got Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree. So just a little spoiler for the rest of the ranking, I played Elden Ring for the first time this year, so it's also on the list, and as you can probably tell by the remaining slots left, it ranks pretty high. So what makes me rank Shadow of the Erdtree a few ranks behind it rather than right next to it. So to give the brief of it, because I really want to dedicate an entire video to Shadow of the Erdtree, while all the content in the DLC is really good and excellent, we're not comparing it to other games, we're comparing it directly to Elden Ring itself. And in my opinion, I think Shadow of the Erdtree is just worse than Elden Ring in almost every way. Don't get me wrong, still insanely good. It's insane that a DLC is considered by me not only as a full game, but one that's ranked pretty high. I just have some issues with it that I don't have with the base game. Like, while the world is absolutely ginormous, it feels largely empty compared to the base game. I think there aren't enough weapons for the new weapon types and too many for the existing weapon types. I think the story is sloppy and it doesn't expand on the base game enough to warrant actually playing the DLC. Like, you get pretty much nothing after beating the final boss, and it's a pretty common reaction to say, is that it? After beating the DLC. So many Remembrance bosses don't have voice lines or even cutscenes, leading to them feeling not special or unremarkable. There are some fights that are just unfun to fight against, but that's just the sort of thing with all FromSoft games, so it's not that big of a surprise. Obviously though, the DLC does some absolutely amazing things as well, either at the same level or even better than base game. For starters, Shadow of the Erdtree is just absolutely gorgeous. There are so many points where I feel like I'm at a museum looking at paintings rather than, playing a game. The level design here is also amazing, from both the legacy dungeons to the overall design of the Land of Shadows. The entire world wraps around itself, with multiple layers to explore. It also does a really good job at showing you places you can actually go, like seeing Bale's Mountain in the distance or seeing Cerulean Coast all the way below you, and then actually being able to go to these places. A few areas though are just annoying to traverse, like a certain spooky forest, and this is super sad because it has a fun dungeon and an even funner boss at the end of it, but the area is just so annoying to get through. While I said some of the bosses are annoying to fight, most of them are pretty good, with a few of them becoming instant fan favourites. So, all in all, an absolutely incredible DLC that definitely puts other games' DLCs to shame, but when you compare it to its base game counterpart, it feels, and I know this is sort of crazy to say, a little bit unfinished and lacking polish, but overall definitely still really, really good.
Truth is, I am Iron Man.
Remember back to rank 17 where I was talking about Overwatch and mentioned that Marvel Rivals would also be on this list. Well, here it is. I'm also shocked at how high this game got in the rankings, but it sort of makes sense. This game is just fresh and an absolute blast to play. As I'm making this list, Season 1 literally just launched and the game has hit a new all-time peak of players. Like, you hear so often that so many games lose 90% of their players in the first month, but how many games do you hear about that not only retain all its players, but actually gain more, having 110% of players 1 month after release? Team fights are fun, Heroes are fun and diverse, cosmetics are amazing, battle pass is fair and chock full of content, and the development team really seem like they care. If you want to know my full thoughts, I have a full game review on the channel right now, so go watch that if you're curious. Anyways, moving on.
It's just a bad dream, Sweet Pea.
Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 1 is a game that literally everyone should play. You can say whatever you want about the following seasons being lacking in content or a shell of their former self, but Season 1 is truly masterful and quite innovative for the time. Season 1 tells the story of Lee and Clem, an unlikely duo that were brought together by the zombie outbreak, where you, playing as Lee, have to keep Clem safe and teach her well, all while trying your best to keep your makeshift team or even family from falling apart. Lee and Clem bounce off of each other so well, they have so many genuinely charming and funny moments together, while also having some of the most heartbreaking. This game made me weep towards the end, like not just shedding a tear but full on crying. The supporting cast around our duo is also pretty good. A lot of these guys aren't super likable, but their reasons are usually valid, so you sort of get why they're a little distance. For all the unlikable characters though, there's an equal amount that are also super likable, like Kenny. I know that some people don't like Kenny because if you're bitchy to him like more than once, he is just an absolute dickhead to you, but I think he's a pretty likable character, so he doesn't give you much reason to really hate him, to be honest, even if he is a little bit, you know.
Well, urban? Oh, you are not saying what I think you're saying.
Is this another Telltale game where your choices don't super matter again? A little, yeah, but I feel like the story it tells and the characters it shows are strong enough to the point where this isn't as big as a problem as the later seasons. The gameplay never really does more than choosing dialogue options or walking around small areas, but I don't really feel like it needs to be more. I was constantly entertained across all 5 chapters, and if you want to take anything away from this video, please play Season 1 of Telltale's Walking Dead. There is not another game like Dark Souls. My first playthrough for this game was actually magical, and can easily see why this game sprouted its own series and genre. Yeah, I know that Demon's Souls came out first, but we're talking about Dark Souls. In your first few hours of gameplay, there may be some genuinely infuriating moments, but every creature is placed so delicately, with each little area feeling like a puzzle you have to solve in order to progress through it efficiently. After beating the first boss and exploring a little more, you somehow find yourself back at the starting area without hitting a single loading screen. This aha moment is what hooks you in, because it's so unexpected and something that could easily be faked with a loading screen, but it's not. The entire world is just so expertly crafted and put together. Each area is so distinct from each other, with enemy design so peculiar and interesting to help sell this fantasy. This game is also gorgeous. The re-release really did the original Dark Souls justice. This game definitely isn't without issues though, because at the end of the day, this is still a game from 2011, so combat is definitely not up to snuff with some of their later releases, and many quality of life things are just absent. But you don't play Dark Souls for either of these things, you play it because it's a one-of-a-kind game. This game though definitely isn't everyone's cup of tea. I can see a lot of people who, after playing Elden Ring as their first FromSoft game, go back to play Dark Souls and instantly bounce off of it. But if you want a challenging game that rewards you for interacting and exploring its mechanics with a magical and unsettling world to go with it, Dark Souls is an absolute must-play. Throughout this entire ranking, I feel like there's been a pretty consistent trend of games, being mainly story games with a few online games and FromSoft appearances. However, here's where we add a curveball to the mix. Persona 5 Royal is easily one of the best games I've ever played. Entering the top 3 now, these are games to where I could probably make the argument for them being 10 out of 10 games. They're that good, and Persona 5 Royal is no exception. This game is pretty much excellent in every category across the board. An absolutely amazing cast of characters that bounce off of each other so well and are just exploding with personality. A story that puts an absolute chokehold on you, desperate to keep playing in order to progress it. Combat that is both flashy and incredibly fun and satisfying, despite being turn-based, a genre many consider dated. And while this game is incredibly long, it never gets boring or repetitive. I was constantly entertained throughout my entire playthrough. Persona 5 Royal is one of my favourite games to talk about, because of all the different mechanics and people you can choose to spend your time with. Pretty much everybody's playthrough is completely different, opening up the game for conversation with people while also making your own playthrough feel like something special. And this is without talking about the Royal exclusive content, because this re-release not only adds a lot of quality of life stuff, so much so that it's hard to believe they weren't in the vanilla version, but adds an entire story arc that is not only the best one in the game, but gives us a story arc that is genuinely my favourite in any game ever. It's that good. The villain of this section is just absolutely amazing. Like, gosh, I could ramble on and on forever about this game. And I have. My first video on this channel is a stupidly long review of the game, where I talk about in depth almost every aspect of the game. This is one of those games that has just got me so hooked that I instantly want to play every single other game in the series. I know there's a surprisingly large amount of discourse for this game, and yeah, there are some things about the game that aren't great, like the difficulty and the Yakoma food section, but like, this game is just so good. I know it's a JRPG, so it's a pretty hard recommend for a lot of people, but trust me, this game goes on really good discounts pretty often. Just pick up the game and play it. You won't regret it. There is an argument to be made that Elden Ring could be the game of the decade. You look at any review for this game, or any of your friends recommend it, watch any YouTube video, anything, everyone is saying the same thing: this game is magnificent. You can't tell, but this game is FromSoft's, the developers, first open world game they've ever made. So it being, you know, one of the best open world games of all time is pretty dang impressive. This world they created is absolutely jam-packed full of content, with dungeons, secrets, and loot hidden behind every little twist, turn, or landmark. With this world being so full, it means what each player finds or what order they find it in on their playthrough will be completely unique and different when compared to another player, creating that unique playthrough aspect that I love so much and briefly talked about with Persona 5 Royal. This world is just absolutely gorgeous. It is absolutely magical walking out into Limgrave or Liurnia for the first time. But it's not just the open world. The gameplay in Elden Ring is some of the most fleshed out and well made combat in any game I've played ever. It's deep and incredibly satisfying to learn. And yes, it is really difficult, but the game does a good job at making most of your deaths feel like your fault. They also supply you with a vast amount of tools you can use to help ease some of this difficulty, so you can make the game as challenging or as easy as you want by choosing what tools you interact with. But without even mentioning these abilities, this game has such a wide array of weapons, talismans, and armor that allow build crafting on another level. This game is just absolutely begging to be played over and over again, so you can try the almost endless amount of builds. There's also a large amount of bosses that are just amazing, so fun to fight and satisfying to learn. However, there is also a large amount of bosses that are also just miserable to fight. But with how many bosses are actually in the game, I feel like it's sort of a given that some aren't as good as others. Another negative you could talk about is the NPC quest lines, and no, we're not talking about the NPCs themselves being bad or the content of their quest. I'm also saying the progression system makes it almost impossible to complete a quest for the first time completely blind. NPCs can find themselves in the most random positions, or just straight up die sometimes if the player progresses to a certain point. There's a lot of things in Elden Ring that are just so unlikely for someone to find unless they're avidly using the wiki or looking something up, which some people see as a negative, and some others don't mind it as much. If you've ever been recommended this game by people, the advice almost everyone gives is don't be scared to look stuff up, because games like these are designed to be dissected and discussed about by the community. If you take anything away from this, try Elden Ring. The developers have somehow made a game in a genre that is insanely hard to approach for new players, and they have made it approachable for new players. You might hate the game when you first play it, you might get angry, but trust me, explore the world, beat some side bosses, then after you beat the first major boss Margit, you will understand everything. This game is a masterpiece, but there still is one more slot left to talk about on the ranking.
Walking city streets with worn cobblestones.
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is one of my favourite games of all time. Never have I been so excited for a game to come out and have it actually genuinely be incredible and live up to all the hype. This game does everything you want it to. It successfully builds upon the source material of the original Final Fantasy VII while still adding new stuff to help feel fresh and innovative. The characters in this game feel alive, deep, and hilarious. They feel exactly as they did in the original, while also now having so much more time to be fleshed out and bounce off of each other. This makeshift family they make together is beautiful, and there is genuinely not one character here or duo that I dislike in any way. This is heightened by the excellent voice actors every single character has. I really struggle to believe that these are video game characters instead of being real. This game made me cry multiple times, from both sadness and just how beautiful some moments were. The story is also so enjoyable. Even having played the original game and knowing the story beats, this game still had me guessing what was happening and had me on the edge of my seat the entire time. Is some of the stuff a little bit messy and confusing, and do they also front load a lot of this sort of messy stuff at the end of the game? Yeah, they do, but I don't think this is an issue at all. It means they're gearing up for something big in the third and final part of the trilogy. Moving on to the combat, this is some of the most well designed and fun combat in any game ever. It achieves that perfect blend of real-time action and strategy that is fun and easy to learn and immensely satisfying to master. There are so many team compositions and ways to build individual characters to the point where no two people will play the game the exact same way, especially if you're continuously swapping out your team over the course of the game, which you will be doing because each character plays so differently from one another while still being so enjoyable to play. The skill trees, while offering many abilities to help define each of your characters, is a little boring in some points. It's hard for me to care about spending 20 skill points for an extra 5 MP. It's how hard I have to reach to find a negative about this game, because there's so few. There's also just so much gameplay besides the combat. Open zone areas with plentiful content to explore and complete, along with an astronomical amount of minigames to help shake up gameplay. Yeah, some of these minigames aren't very fun, with some straight up just being miserable, but there's also so many minigames that are incredibly fun and have me looking forward to. Especially since these minigames were usually the most common ones, as if the developers knew which ones were wins and which weren't. This game is also just gorgeous and oozing with personality. Areas stay truthful to the source material while also being their own thing. The variety in these environments are crazy, making each and every area feel like its own individual thing, helped immensely by the soundtrack. The soundtrack really makes this game come alive, and is easily one of the best soundtracks in any game ever. Over the course of my first playthrough, which totaled to about 70 hours, I was never once bored or didn't want to play. This game, put simply, is a masterpiece, and to say I'm excited for the third installment would definitely be an understatement. This game deserves all the praise it gets and more, and it's for this reason that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was my favourite game of 2024 and one of my favourite games of all time. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. I had a lot of fun making this video and I hope you had fun watching it. It's at this point I would say like and subscribe, but if you watched the entirety of the video, that's enough for me. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart. Let me know in the comments your own game ranking or even what your favourite game of 2024 was, and I'd love to hear it. I really wanted to get this video out before the new year, but as you can tell, that didn't really happen, did it? But because of this, I've already played and completed my first game of 2025, so if you're still here now, I'm going to give you a little teaser for the next game review video I'm making. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Can you hear me? Geppetto's puppet. We need your help.